The story of David and Goliath is such a fascinating story. I remember as a child hearing this story, and it would give me such faith in God. Welcome back to Inspirational Moments, and today we are going to be talking about that strong and courageous little boy named David. Saul and the men of Israel were in battle with the Philistines. The head of the Philistine army was described in 1 Samuel 17:4-7. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. Goliath challenged Saul and his army, continuing from verses 8 to 11. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Goliath taunted Saul and his army for 40 days. Now David was a shepherd boy tending to his father's sheep and the youngest of his siblings. His father sent him with food for his brothers who were with Saul, and asked him to go find out how his brothers were going and come back to report to him. So David went to visit his brothers. And verse 23 continues, "Then as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them. All the men of Israel fled when Goliath came out, and David heard them talking about the reward from the king for the man who slays Goliath." Verse 26 continues, "Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, 'What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?' David's brothers reprimanded him for speaking about the issue, but Saul heard him and sent for him. Verse 32 says, "Then David said to Saul, 'Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine.' And Saul said to David, 'You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth.' David reassured Saul that he could do the job. And Saul told him in verse 37, 'Go, and the Lord be with you.' David was very small in stature next to Goliath, and he attempted to put on an armor but couldn't even walk. David went to battle with his staff, his sling, and a few smooth pebbles he picked up from the brook. Goliath laughed when he saw small David approaching him. And verse 45 says, "Then David said to the Philistine, 'You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied.' Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of its sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. David prevailed. He went with the power of God, and God took away his fears. God gave him courage to believe in himself. Goliath-sized situations may taunt us in our lives, but God has the power to help us overcome once we trust in him and depend on him. If you are not subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button for more inspirational moments and ring the notification bell to get videos as soon as they are posted. And if you were inspired by this video, click the like button and don't forget to share it with others. Join me next week for more inspirational moments.